Welcome to Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs, the podcast that dives deep into the stories of trailblazers who shape our world. Our co-host, Lulu Benavidez, is a seasoned entrepreneur in the beauty industry, is a photographer, artist, and the proud owner of Lulu's The Salon in Galveston, Texas. Our other co-host, Krokonis, Hanson, is a visionary in the entrepreneurial world with years of experience in business innovation and development. Together, they bring you insights, inspiration, and the journeys of remarkable individuals who have made their mark. And with that, let's get started. Jason Buff is an award-winning fine art portrait photographer, graphic designer, and filmmaker based in Mérida, Yucatan, Mexico. As the founder of Jabu Studio, Jason is known for creating evocative portraits that blend cinematic storytelling with timeless artistry, marked by his signature dark and moody aesthetic. Originally from Burlington, North Carolina, Jason began his creative journey in the film industry before expanding into graphic design and Photoshop. That technical foundation sharpened his eye for composition and led him to pursue photography full-time in 2008, a leap that not only redefined his career, but also opened the door to living abroad and building a life rooted in creativity. Today, Jason's work is deeply inspired by the culture, color, and texture of Mexico City, where he lives with his wife and son. Through Jabu Studio, he offers both transformative portrait experiences and educational workshops that attract clients and students from around the world. Beyond the camera, Jason is passionate about mentorship and connection. For over a decade, he's led international retreats and workshops. Beyond the camera, Jason is passionate about mentorship and connection. For over a decade, he's led international retreats and workshops, teaching both the craft of photography and the cultural richness of the Yucatan. His teaching emphasizes not just technique, but the deeper art of human connection between subject and artist, teacher and student, and across cultural boundaries. Whether behind the lens or in the classroom, Jason continues to inspire others to pursue creativity with courage, skill, and authenticity. Please welcome to the podcast, Jason Buff.
So, Jason, we're so excited that you're here today with us, with Sue and I.
Hello.
And we're going to start this podcast. But first of all, I met you years and years ago in Houston at another studio with Maria. I don't know what's Maria's last name right now.
She's Latino, so she has very last name.
Yes.
I'm the same way too. I know one's Maria Michaela Ariano.
Ariano. Yes. So that's where I met you. And
all you have to do is say Maria and people know who you are. Maria from Houston.
Maria from Houston. And I took a class from you and it was fabulous. And even though I'm a hairdresser by trade, I'm also photograph anyway. Matter of fact, I have a photo shoot tomorrow.
You're a fabulous photographer.
Oh, well, I just dab a little bit in everything. So, Jason, can you tell us what first interested you into photography?
Wow, what a great question. Let me ponder that. Well, I mean, I've been, really always been interested in filmmaking and photography. And, I started out with my family's little SLR, 35 millimeter camera. And I used to just sit, I didn't have film. So I would just sit there and I just loved the lens and looking through the viewfinder. And I would actually sit there and watch TV through the camera and pretend I was taking pictures, and I would walk around pretending like I was taking pictures of everybody because I think my dad had strangely enough, my dad, who has no interest in photography, had for some reason like an 85 millimeter lens. So I just used to love walking around and looking through the lens and pretending like I was taking pictures because I couldn't afford the film or to develop or any of that stuff. And then I really actually was more into filmmaking when I was a kid. So I was a huge fan of Steven Spielberg and all I wanted to do was to become a filmmaker. These are early days for all the technologies. When my family finally got a VHS recorder, like the old school one, it was like a camera with a backpack that had the cassettes on it. I would just basically ask for video cassettes all the time and walk around shooting stuff and, put the camera on a tripod and shoot anything from people playing basketball, or we would do little, we would play Rambo or War in the backyard and stuff like that. And I would shoot it like I was shooting a movie, even though it looked terrible. But I just always loved being behind a camera. I hated being in front of a camera. So this for me is kind of difficult, but
Yeah.
I tried to like myself as good as I could, but I've got my little soft box here. Yeah, so I can only remember, and it's funny because I never really thought it was a big, I didn't go into the creative world until I was older, or the even the photography world. But my mom was always like, you should be a photographer, da da da. But I never liked the chemical side. I mean, I didn't like 35 millimeter. When I was in middle school, I took a photography class, and it stuck with me that I wasn't even the best photographer in that photography class. And there were a bunch of kids who were like on the basketball team and had absolutely no interest in photography. And their pictures were better than, at least I felt like their pictures were better than mine. And I was like, if I can't even take pictures as good as like Charles from basketball, from sports, Charles from sports, like, how would I consider myself a good photographer, And I just, for some reason, that stayed in my head for years. And I was like, he had these awesome black and white pictures of a basketball goal. And I tried to reproduce that, and I was just like, I'm just trying to copy Charles.
Yeah.
And it's just weird how you stay with that stuff for a really long time. But I just absolutely always loved it. I tried for years to go into, filmmaking, and I worked in LA and San Francisco doing camera work because it just always came really easy to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just from an early age, I've always been very visual, and I've always loved kind of observing, I guess.
I've always interested, I've asked this to several guests, who have very similar personalities to yours and have very similar stories. And I always wonder, did you come from a creative family, or are your parents or anybody into the arts big time? You wonder, where does this creative desire get embedded in people?
Exactly, yeah. No, I mean, in my family, there's not a lot of creativity. I don't know if there maybe would have been if my parents had been in different circumstances or whatever. But yeah, like there was absolutely no interest in anything creative in my family, And my mom worked at a hospital, and my dad worked at like a big company. He worked at like it was IBM for a while, then AT&T, then So I mean, he was kind of like a company man. And so when they would give me advice for like careers to follow, it never, or my abilities to do, I was kind of a really bad musician, and I used to draw and everything. I was just like, I've always been just a creative person. Right. And,
Can't
they didn't really know what to do with
that. Maybe should consider selling insurance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was kind of it's interesting because I always look at like my generation, like Gen X, we all had parents who were boomers they grew up in a very kind of different world than we did. So the idea was always to, go to college, then get a job at a company, and the company will take care of you for the rest of your life. And, the things that you should want out of life is like, a good cushy kind of like, salary so you can pay for your house. And anyway, so all the things that people were, around me were saying, okay, this is what you want to do, And it's interesting because I was you're born into that like 1950s mentality, even though it's the 1990s. You know what I mean? And so it's like the world has moved on, and I find that I do the same thing with my son. Like I talk to him about a world or a mindset that doesn't really match the times anymore, because even now I'm becoming more and more of a dinosaur, saying like, this is how the world works, but I don't really know how the world works at all. I know how the world worked maybe in the 90s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you know what I'm saying? So my parents, they weren't creative at all. I have an older sister who was kind of she did really well in school. She was valedictorian of her school, went to law school, has always been like, really at home in that world. And then I felt like I was kind of from another planet, and, I don't know how I got through school. And, years later, I find out I've got like ADHD and I'm on the spectrum and all these things about myself. And so I was trying so hard to be in a lane that I didn't belong in. And then when I finally found my lane, I was like, oh, I can do this kind of better than other people. And it was like the first time that I was kind of, like the first time that I started really working with Photoshop, I was like, oh, okay, like this is what I was supposed to do, because I can just sit here for hours. And I love, I love editing, and I love like working with light and working with people. And, it's like, oh, okay, I wasn't designed to do those other things that I was trying to do.
Right.
So, Jason, you talked about, staying in your own lane and the difference between your parents as baby boomers and you're Gen X, correct?
74.
Yeah, yeah, right. And we're 20 years older than you. But anyway, so I did some research and you talked about, in one of the questions I have for you, what is neurodiversity? Because I think a lot of creative people have that. So can you tell the audience what exactly is that?
Well, I mean, I can give you my kind of perspective on it. It's funny because whenever people, I do a lot of workshops, and when people come into my workshops, I always say, I was diagnosed with ADHD late in life, and then most of the people there in the class also are in the same situation. So I say, well, if you haven't been diagnosed with ADHD, let me just be the first to welcome you to.
Welcome
Because if you're taking a photography workshop, the chances are pretty high that you're, maybe a little on the spectrum and a little bit, ADHD or whatever. Neurodiversity, I think, just kind of refers to what, the people who kind of fit in with the world that was created for them, people that did well in school, people that kind of, you would say like neurotypical people, they fit in with a more traditional kind of lifestyle and things that are considered more kind of normal, quote unquote. Neurodiverse people like me do a lot of things that really have make no logical sense. A lot of what I do is very impulsive and very much about feeling. ADHD is kind of, to put it really simply, it's like I'm either 1000% focused on something or I can't focus at all. So the things that I'm good at, I'm really, really good at. And I think, like, even for people that would be considered neurotypical, like when they're really good at things, it just means that their kind of part of the spectrum aligns with the traditional things. Going back to like my sister, for example, who's my favorite person in the whole world, but she, like, when she was growing up, like her skill set aligns perfectly with the situation she was put in, which is like public school. And so mine didn't. And the things that I was really good at, I didn't figure out until later. I just thought I was stupid. I just thought I was kind of like, okay, well, I guess I'll, never do anything in life because, I can't sit here and focus and read and you know what I mean? I think that we're all kind of a little bit, what you would say, on the spectrum or whatever. A lot of the things I didn't know about myself until my son was being diagnosed with things. And then I would be there with him and I would be like, can I maybe fill out that form too? And I remember, like, I went to a doctor who specializes in like ADHD and stuff like that. And my son actually tested out of it. He didn't have it. And when I filled out the form, he looked at it and was kind of like, hello, like,
Hello.
yeah, you're kind of like off the charts here. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I think that most people who are creative, that's kind of their superpower. And I think we kind of wear it as a badge of honor, that kind of being on the spectrum, being a little bizarre, whatever. And that makes us able to really use that in our creative work and do stuff that, we see the world in kind of maybe a different way. And it's a little more impulsive and a little more, not making sense to people that are more in like a normal track. Like an accountant is going to look at my life and not really be like, oh, well, that doesn't make any, why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, yeah, but it's how I felt. It's more about emotions,
Yeah. I have a question because I understand totally, and I think there are many people who would identify with what you're saying, but was there an event or some trajectory that actually sort of put you on the path to your career? Or, sometimes it's that one opportunity or that one person that really propels you to start seeing your lane, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, it was funny because I literally last week was in San Francisco and I hadn't been there since I graduated from college, and I drove for some reason, I just drove right past LA in a moment of just like, I just didn't want to get off the exit.
Yeah.
So I just kept going north, and I finally ended up in San Francisco. And I was there literally at the first place that I ever got a job. The building was like almost condemned. I mean, the place that I used to work wasn't there anymore. The movie theater beside it was like demolished. And it was just this weird feeling of like remembering being that guy back in the day and just trying to I was a history major for most of my college career. And so I was I was going to be a history teacher and try to follow that realm. And then when I changed schools, I had to do some extra. Okay.
So,
Hanging on
turn
the
around.
wall.
I thought I had my letter out.
Good. Where are you?
I'm concerned. Sue. Are you okay, Sue?
I'm concerned too.
Sue, okay.
Can you turn? It says Sue recording has stopped. Are you there?
I can hear you. I'm going to go back. Just ignore me. Just
Okay,
ignore
we'll
me.
ignore
I'll
you.
come back on. Just keep talking because you're doing.
So, but I think that as you're growing up, you always have that kind of like that. As you're, the younger you are, you're always kind of like, seeing the things around you, and you're like, is that me or is that not me? So we
Right.
change. I had a phase when I was like a punk rocker, and I had a phase when I was a skateboarder, and a phase when I was doing this or that, and it's just like you're kind of like, this isn't really me. This is me pretending to be something that I'm not. And then eventually you start figuring out the things that actually are you, and you're like, okay, I genuinely enjoy this. I genuinely like. I remember when I went from taking history classes to film classes, and I was like, well, this isn't like a class at all. This is just fun. This is what I would be doing in my spare time. And it's like, that's kind of how I feel with photography now too. It's like, the stuff that I do that I'm getting paid for, it's like, I would be doing that anyway.
Exactly.
And so that's kind of the thing.
I'm pretending.
Well, I mean,
I'm back. I'm sorry if I went somewhere.
you and many more people. That's all right. We missed you. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Like, things are very different, obviously, now than they were, 30 years ago when I was just getting started. So it was more about like, I tried a lot of things, and some things fit, and some things were just kind of like, I had to try much, much harder. But like I think Photoshop was the first time when, back in those days, I used to have to go to like Barnes and Noble. There was no YouTube. There was no online training or anything. So I'd go to Barnes and Noble and get those big yellow books that cost like $100 and order a coffee. And I would just sit there all day and read books on Photoshop. And then I got Deke McClellan's big VHS, series on like learning Photoshop. And I just really loved it. But it was still a long time before Photoshop and actual photography connected with each other. Because at that time, photography was still primarily like film. And digital cameras really weren't that sophisticated. So
Right.
it was much, much later that I got into all that. It's weird because there's a whole generation of us, like guys, in late 40s, early 50s, who are now kind of rediscovering things because the technology of their 20s was not. So you're like frozen. Anyway. But it's interesting because like I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I look at people that are in their late teens and 20s, and they're making films, and they're becoming really good photographers. And I always look back at that time period, and I was like, yeah, that would have been cool, but that technology didn't even exist back then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's so interesting. I have a friend of mine that's also not a hairdresser, but he's also a photographer. And I attended one of his most attending classes. But anyway, I had attended one of his classes, and the torsos on his models were very elongated. The hair looked really nice. And I thought, damn, where does he get these models? Well, then I took a Photoshop class from him, and he used the liquefy tool, and he elongated the torso. He made the shape a little bit wider. I thought, oh, shit. Why didn't I know this?
Like, I'm out of here.
Yeah. So now when I shoot with Salvia, he's all about the actual, what the model's wearing and how the background looks. And because my eye is to see the shape, I take the photograph, even though we shoot the same model and we have the same photographs somewhat. He always tells me, do not cut the legs and do not cut the hands, or cut them all off and just do whatever. So when I take it into Photoshop, or I take it into Vivo or software, and I concentrate on the actual shape of the hair, where I know everything else is okay, or if there's a wrinkle on the blouse, then I know how to get it out with the liquefy too. Is that something you teach in your workshops, in your classes?
What specifically?
The Photoshop,
The editing.
the liquefy tools, any of the tools.
Oh,
that,
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing about Photoshop that really kind of gave me the confidence to teach was that, I was learning Photoshop primarily to be a graphic designer. So I worked in graphic design for probably 20 years before I ever started editing pictures. And then I kind of came in backwards to photography because I could take a really, really mediocre picture and then I could Photoshop the living hell out of it and make it look cool. And back in those days, just having that kind of HDR look was really like in fashion, and people were like, oh, how'd you do that? And I was like, oh, you just, boost this and boost that. But one of the interesting things that I noticed, because I literally every single day for hours just sat there working with Photoshop, I was like, I actually know it pretty well. And I know it better than I know photography and lighting. And even though I had studied lighting and I had worked on different, teams of like commercial productions and film productions and been a grip and a PA and everything and watched lighting and learned lighting in like different lighting classes, I still was kind of just really starting. I look at the stuff that I did, let's say like 15 years ago or 10 years ago, and it's still not very well done compared to what I'm doing now. But yeah, I used to watch these videos of people teaching Photoshop for photography, and I would get frustrated because I was like, oh, there's a better way to do that. Like there's a faster way to do it if you combine this with this, and then if you use this channel and then you move, And so I got to the point where when I was watching like the big photographers doing retouching, and I felt like that frustration, I was like, well, maybe if I, started teaching this, I mean, it kind of made me feel like, oh, okay, I wouldn't just be BSing. I actually do know a lot about this, you know what I mean? So that's how I've always felt with Photoshop, is just like, it's kind of like half of my process. So if you come to my classes, more and more my lighting has developed and gotten better and more complicated, I think. But the Photoshop part of it is really where it can be a bit confusing for people, but it's also like an eye-opener as to like really not so much just the technical side, but maybe a more philosophical way, if that sounds right, of working with Photoshop. It's very difficult for people who have a certain kind of, like going back to people who are neurodiverse, it's interesting because we also learn in a different way. And so storytelling is a really important part of the learning process. And that's how generations kind of learn things, is through stories. So even with Photoshop, I like to tell stories about, I remember when this, the camera raw filter, I remember when that was invented and when people had been asking for it, or I remember this or that, you know what I mean? And it's, and also making it kind of funny, you know what I mean? Like if you can add humor and add stories to things, then for somebody who's neurodiverse, they can kind of learn it a little bit easier. Yeah. But yeah, Photoshop is a huge part of what I do. And I realized I would do better with Photoshop than a lot of other people, only because I Photoshop stuff when I'm in a bad mood. So it's a form of meditation that I sit down and edit while, like, if I'm annoyed, I'm just like, and I'll get like a knock on the door and my wife is like, are you editing again? And I'm like, I just need to edit for a while and then I'll come back out and like be social.
I would like to ask you this question because I find that a lot of people who teach are also very emotional. They're nurturers, they're sharers, they care about the work that they do and other people do. So I'm really interested in sort of what motivates you to be a teacher, to be an educator, to do this labor of love that you're doing now.
Well, it was funny because before I started teaching, whenever I would do photo shoots, I would be so excited about what we were doing. Like I'd be like, okay, and this light's going to bounce off of here, and I'm using this light for this, and da-da-da. And so it was actually at somebody else's suggestion that I do a workshop. And this is probably, I started doing workshops maybe about 10 years ago, or maybe like 8 years ago, I don't remember. But I was like, who's going to come to my workshop? Like, I didn't even like understand that was an option. So I just, here in Merida, I live in Yucatan in Mexico. So I had to do it in Spanish. So I put out an ad, and I was like, I had 10 spots for people to come in, and basically what I was going to do was just show my setup and then show my editing. And I was kind of like, and you put yourself in kind of a vulnerable situation because you're like, okay, here it is, and then you expect to hear like crickets, you know what I mean? Like nobody interested.
Yeah. now I can get that off the table. Put that phone there. Nobody's interested.
Well, so I did that, and I had been really doing mostly photography as a hobby at that point. I was still a graphic designer. I used to have a podcast that was about independent filmmaking, so I was really more into filmmaking. And I was really kind of financially, I was kind of struggling, and I was like, okay, well, I mean, it was difficult for me because I live kind of in a town where I don't really work in this town. I work when I come to the U.S., but here in Merida, I'm somewhat kind of priced out of the market here. Right. But not because there's a lot of great photographers, but they're charging way too low for what they're doing, you know. And so I also don't want to interfere with their marketing, you know, like put myself in there. So I was primarily just doing my own personal projects here and still working as a graphic designer. Anyway, so I did that. I had gotten a little bit of a following on Instagram. The Instagram thing is kind of like started growing, you know, over time. Sometimes it's like, for whatever reason, I get a lot of people that start following me, and then it's like nobody, you know, like nobody sees any of my pictures. I don't know what's going on. But for whatever reason, I'd been posting my stuff on Instagram, mostly because I'm in need of attention, you know. So when I retouch something, I would put it up and be like, hey, look at, you know, that kind of needy child in me was like, look at this cool thing I did. Of course, like most of those things now are you know, pictures I would never, ever want anybody to see. But I was really, really confident, like undeservedly confident back then. But anyway, I did the workshop and it sold out. And I wasn't charging much, you know, because I was like, I mean, is somebody going to pay $100 to spend a whole day with me, you know? And so, I mean, really, I was like, who would pay $100 to hear me talk about photography? And the class like sold out, and then I closed it. And, you know, I struggled a little bit, and over time, I've just kind of gotten more of a feel for what people actually want to learn. And, you know, like I used to kind of be into the whole like kumbaya thing of let's sit around and let's all become like a team and work together, you know, learn about each other and whatever. And then I realized people were just like, can you just get to the tricks and like, you know, what preset do you use and what camera settings do you use? So I kind of like toned that down a little bit. And now it's a little bit less of like a drum circle and more of like a, you know, actually saying, okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the psychological side of this. Don't worry, I'm going to get to all the, you know, I'm going to show you exactly how I make these images and how I do this and do that and where I put the lights and what kind of lights I use and all that stuff. But also there's a side of it that's I think the psychological side of being a creative person, and especially a lot of the people that come to my workshops are people that maybe had like a mid-career change, and they maybe worked in something, their 20s and 30s, they maybe worked in something, and then they made the move into photography because it was like, you know, a lot of people don't really have a choice when they're younger, and then they finally had a little bit of financial freedom, and they were like, okay, I don't want to work in this non-creative world, or at least I need to have a creative outlet. And so it's also talking about what it is to be a creative, which is, for me, not about the final work. It has nothing to do with what my final images, because I really have no control over the quality of the final images that I have. And a lot of my best images are just kind of like, okay, you know, I look at it like songwriters. Like you're just constantly in the state of being creative and writing things, and some of it's great and some of it comes out and it's, you know, Stairway to Heaven, and other times it's like a B-side that nobody ever heard of, and then everybody, you know, Instagram is your greatest hits, and so you've got all the best things you've done, but it's not about that. I mean, it's nice to have a nice body of work, but I'm constantly out shooting, taking pictures, you know, any opportunity I get. If somebody calls me and they're like, hey, we're going to go do this, I'm like, yeah, I'll come. You know, if I'm invited, I'll come and help out. I'll hold a light, or, you know, if you need a, you know, cinematographer or a photographer or whatever. But it's like, that's the reason why you start generating work that actually becomes, what ends up becoming your body of work, is because you're constantly creating and editing and putting out pictures and stuff like that. And some of them are still to this day are pretty bad, you know. I mean, the ratio has gotten better, you know, like. But like I have so many photo shoots that I still haven't even gotten to. The other day I went back and I was like cleaning out a hard drive, and I found like 3 or 4 photo shoots where I had like done whole like changes of clothes and all kinds of cool stuff. And I finally uploaded it, and the model was like, oh, hey, That only took 4 years. 15 pictures. Yeah, and I try to kind of really focus on that side of things, which is like not being so, it's good to, talking about motivation. I always joke that it's like anything can be your motivator. I mean, I know a lot of people that are motivated by pure spite,
Yeah.
They're motivated by like somebody. I worked with a woman who she had been taking a photography class, and the teacher was kind of rude to her and like was, saying that she didn't really have a lot of talent for it. I don't remember the whole story, but she dedicated the next 2 years of her life to just getting really good just so she could go and beat that teacher in a photography competition. And so it's like, okay, well, that worked, and sometimes, there's different things that fill your sail and push you forward. I'm constantly competing with other photographers, and not like in a bad way. I mean, they're friends of mine,
right.
But I've got friends who I see their images and I'm just like, man, like, my stuff is garbage compared to this, so I'll go out and I'll try to do something along the lines of what they did and see if I can kind of like match that look or do something kind of like they did. But that's really the motivator. And other times it's just because you need to get out of the house and you've been, in your office editing too much and you're like, okay, I just want to go to the beach and try shooting with a flash or try this look or that look or whatever. And so I'm constantly shooting stuff just for fun. And then when people come and ask me for, portraits or whatever, I'm still in that mentality of like, I've been practicing, I feel comfortable. If I get away from shooting for too long, like in the pandemic, I stopped shooting for like 4 or 5 months. And when I came back, it was like, somebody who was, played basketball or something, and I hadn't shot a basketball in like 4 months. I didn't have a feel for the light. Everything didn't really feel right. I didn't really know how to direct and how to pose, and so I always try to be shooting, even when I don't have paid gigs. I just try to find people and put things together, nothing super complicated. And I look at different people to be inspired from, like, I hop on Instagram and I have tons of different people that I follow, and I'm like, okay, so this guy's doing this with, a colored gel light in the back and okay, let me try something like that. And then I was obsessed with one guy the other day who does a lot of flash work on like city streets and stuff. So it was like, okay, I'm going to call up a couple of different, people that I know that like to model and see if they'd be into that, And so we went out and I just took my flash and we just took a few street shots, and, the first few were kind of mediocre, and then I kind of got into the groove and started getting good at it. And then we finally got a few that looked really good. But that's kind of, the routine that I go through all the time.
That's so true, because I know that I shoot with a wedding photographer, Savia, and he gets me to provide the model, and he does totally different shoot than he normally will.
Right.
So that's what creative people do, is they go out of their realm of what they normally do in the studio, and they go out and shoot whatever they want to shoot because they can.
Right.
And that keeps your mind fresh all the time. So what advice do you have to give to your younger self?
Really, very subtle, very subtle.
Yeah.
So let me see these questions you wrote. Well, let me think. Let me finish that question for you. What advice would I have for my younger self? Well, I mean, I didn't never like appreciate. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, who's a interior decorator, and he and I were chatting about like our growing up, our relationship with our own kind of creativity, and I was always embarrassed by my creativity, So if I had something kind of interesting to say or something kind of weird to say, I would always keep it to myself, because people in my circle would just look at me like, what's Buff talking about again? Like, what's wrong with him? And I always wanted to be more normal. And he was like, oh, wow, like I can't even imagine. Like I was always around creative people, and we were always trying to outdo each other and trying to like, and we would just do creative things all the time. When I was a kid, we used to do like puppet shows and like, write songs and make videos that were like, our own little TV shows and all this stuff. And I never really appreciated that. I thought it was kind of like, I was kind of embarrassed by it. And luckily I had some friends that lived in my neighborhood, and we would all do stuff like that. But the thing that I would tell myself, like my younger self, would be just to really kind of appreciate that side of myself and realize that the other people around me kind of, I recently had like a conversation with my sister that really kind of blew me away, which was she always wanted to be more creative. And she was, and my sister's hilarious. She's one of the funniest people that I know. But she was like, yeah, all I did was just follow the normal path. And you were going off to California and then off to Europe, living here and living there. And like, you know, I would go off on sailboats and work as a crew member. And I would just like had all these little adventures when I was younger. And then eventually I live in Mexico now. So, and then I had to learn Spanish and whatever. And I always thought of that as just being kind of like the black swan, or not the black swan, the black sheep of the family, because I couldn't like do a 9-to-5 job. I actually tried, you know, I had a nervous breakdown because I tried to work at a 9-to-5 job and I was so miserable that I had to finally just leave because I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but like literally doing the same thing every day is making me crazy. And so now I wake up and I really, you know, sometimes I'll have something like this or I'll have a photo shoot or whatever, but I love having kind of an open schedule and not knowing what I'm doing. And I love living down here, which is very chaotic a lot of times. And so I would really try to, you know, tell myself that like, just go with what you are. Don't cover it up. Don't try to be ashamed and try to pretend, you know, in the neurodivergent world, we call it masking. So masking is that you have the way you actually think and behave normally or naturally when nobody's around, and then you very, very like you start to try to mimic people around you because you're like, oh, this is the way that a normal person acts. So I became really good at mimicking other people and acting very normal and like looking people in the eyes, which is a hard thing for people on the spectrum. And really just faking it, you know. And then when I would be myself, because it would really require a lot of me to be social. And so I would be social, but when I was social, I would be so on because it was like me mimicking how I thought I was supposed to be. I thought I was supposed to be like making everybody laugh and be funny and you know, kind of putting on a show. And then I would come back home and I would be like exhausted and just need to like rest for like 5 or 6 days before I like talk to somebody again because I've been, and I see that like in my mom too, she does that. And my sister does that too. They're like on, you know?
Yeah.
And then but they don't like, it's like it takes a long time to build yourself up to be like social, you know? So you start thinking, okay, what can I do? And that's why a lot of people drink and you know, they have to kind of like integrate themselves, you know?
Yeah.
But that's like one of those things that like now I don't really do, and I've become a lot less social. When I do my workshops, because I want to really be there and focus on everybody and have energy, I literally like go to my hotel room, I sleep, I watch TV, I don't do anything. And then I go to the workshop and I'm like totally focused on everybody there. And I'm like, I want to be there for them. I don't want to be tired, and I want to be able to focus specifically on what we're doing and come up with ideas, because a lot of what I do is kind of, it's not really pre-planned. I don't really put together, I don't have like an art director and a makeup artist and people. I just come in and I mean, you know, Lulu, you know this, you know,
Yeah.
I literally come in with no idea what I'm going to do, and we just start inventing stuff, and a lot of cool stuff comes out of it. I try to find interesting models, and, you know, it's funny that I remember very well the workshap that you took.
Yeah.
And
I still have the photographs.
The beautiful red-haired girl.
Yes, yes.
All the different things we were doing there. So, yeah, it's funny that I remember pretty much every workshop, and I could tell you specific things that happened and specific people that were there and things that I was kind of like struggling to come up with. And even as a photographer, you know, I've had a certain amount of success with what I do, but I still see plenty of people that are out there, you know. I mean, I've got some guys here in town that are really good at like makeup artists and putting together like editorial shoots and very stylized shoots. And I'm like, I wish I could do more like that, you know. And then I try to do it, and it looks like my shoot. It looks exactly like my style again, you know?
Yeah.
So I started to kind of embrace the fact that it's all improvisational. It's all just coming up with stuff as we're doing it, seeing what works, what doesn't work. And I always thought that I couldn't do workshops because I have no ability to pre-plan things or to organize. You know, I can't do PowerPoint documents. I've tried to do that. I tried to come in and have like a pre-made workshop to make things easier so that people could come in, and I'd just be like, okay, step 1 this, step 2 that, whatever. And then I immediately like got off track and started talking about something else, and then I never got to the PowerPoint or whatever, and I was like, I could never do a workshop because that's, you know, I've seen how they work and I don't know how to do them that way.
Oh,
And then you
fun.
realize, okay, well, I'm also talking to people who also have ADHD, so they might actually appreciate the fact that I'm jumping all over the place, so they're not getting bored because they're like, okay, I don't want to sit there and listen to, okay, step one, we're going to learn about this tool. Next, we're going to learn about that tool. No, it's about like a fury of just creative energy and, coming up with something in the moment.
So I have to ask you, because you're talking about masking and how you work and your energy. Are you happy with your portfolio now? Do you feel like it really reflects your process?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because some days it's really weird how your brain and your eyes work, because I'll look at my whole portfolio sometimes and I'm just like, oh my God, this is like, I don't even know what I do. It's just women or like, it's just people staring at a camera and their hair is blowing and I don't even know, like, what am I doing? What is this? And then other days that something else is happening in my head, it's like I look at it and it's like just this amazing feeling of like looking at all the tones and looking at all the emotion and whatever, and I actually kind of feel it. So it's like, you know what I mean? I mean, there's people that look at, will watch movies and don't have the same feeling as those of us who like are really affected by movies and music, and you feel it at a very deep level, but you don't always feel it. You know what I mean? Sometimes your brain is in a different place. So to answer your question, see, this is the autism. Or maybe the ADHD. We don't know. It's like, and my son he talks to me like that now too. He's like, Dad, I didn't need like 2 hours talking about like the history of the zip code. You know what I mean? I was like, wait, okay, there's a video here. I've been doing research because you asked me a question about your zip code.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, Dad, I didn't need to know like the entire history of where zip codes come from. Like, I just needed to know what our zip code was for filling out this form. I was like, oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
He's like, get the tism under control, Dad. I'm like, I got it.
I love that.
But yeah, and then I don't even remember what.
Can I talk about if you're happy with your process and your portfolio? And I think, yeah.
Sometimes it changes because like I have a lot of pictures now from, I just did a workshop in LA and another one in San Francisco. So I have like, I'll look at it and I'll be working on an image and I'll be like, oh my God, like I'm going to win a freaking Academy Award for this. It's so good. And then I'll get a coffee and I'll come back and I'll be like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, this is terrible, And then I'll look at the same image like a year or two later and I'll be like, I should have won like the Nobel Peace Prize. It's so amazing. You know what I mean? So I never trust my eyes. And I even talk about that in my classes. I'm like, I don't ever know what I'm going to like later. You know what I mean? And then I'll look at the last few images I've uploaded, I was kind of like that. I was like, I really, really liked it. And it really like gave me that kind of emotional response. I like to, kind of have I have hair blowing and very dramatic images. So it's kind of like this crescendo of emotion of like somebody who's in the middle of something dramatic. But I don't like pre-plan too much. Like I can't be like, okay, this is exactly what I was going for when I started this, A lot of it is discovering the image in the process of shooting and then again discovering the image in the process of editing. So the image that I actually come up with is beyond what I could have like come up. I have no ability to pre-visualize at all.
Right. I love that answer.
So, Jason, can you tell me, how did you wind up in Yucatan, Mexico? And how did you learn how to speak Spanish?
Well, that's up for debate as to how well I speak Spanish, because I think it's the, what is it, the Dunstan-Kruger effect or whatever. It's like, at first you're like, oh my God, I'm amazing. And I would go home and my mom she'd be like, can we go to the Mexican restaurant and you can order in Spanish? And I was like, Mom, really? No. Like maybe for you, I speak Spanish really well, but like to someone who speaks native Spanish, I still sound like a 2-year-old. And my son makes fun of me because he was born here and he speaks obviously like native Spanish and English. And I'll be talking to somebody and they'll walk away and he'll just look at me like,
that's my dad.
So bad. He's like, okay, first of all, you said this. And you meant this, right? What did you mean when you said this? And I was like, he's like, you didn't say that at all. And sometimes my wife is from here and my son will be talking with my wife and they'll be joking, like they'll be in the kitchen and I'll hear them laughing and speaking Spanish in the kitchen and I'll come in and I'll be like, ¿Qué están haciendo? And they're like, No. No.
No, don't speak.
Don't try to join the Spanish conversation, because my wife speaks like perfect English. And they're like, we'll change to English for the idiot, you know. And so, yeah, I'm like, but I want to, you know, and I told my son the other day, because I grew up only speaking English, and then, you know, I was born I grew up in North Carolina, and there was no Spanish or any foreign languages, you know, near Burlington, North Carolina. And so it's still really cool to me that I finally learned how to speak a second language, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'll be driving in the car. I'm like, you know, we could speak Spanish. You know, if you want. He's like, Dad, just don't even try. Like, it hurts me to hear you speak Spanish. I'm like, I'm really cool in English. Whenever I try to speak Spanish, I'm like, I know I sound like an idiot. And it really gives me a lot of, you know, sympathy for people in the U.S. that I grew up with who were speaking English as a second language. And so I realized, like, oh, yeah, they sound cute and everything, like speaking English and whatever, and the sound with their foreign accent and everything. But, you know, it's not until later. I mean, it sounds stupid, but I'm like, yeah, in their own language, they sound, you know, like if you listen to like Jackie Chan speak English, you know, he doesn't sound like that in Chinese, you know, he sounds very articulate and very like, you know, and so just that inability to be articulate is difficult in Spanish, because I know how bad I sound. I'm good enough that I know how bad it sounds when I speak. And especially when I like hear myself back on a video. But I came to Yucatan in 2002, so I've been down here like 23 years.
Wow.
And I just didn't really fit in with the U.S. I mean, even now when I go back and do my workshops and things, I don't really fit in the U.S. And I can't really describe it other than there's a certain comfort for me in discomfort. And there's a certain comfort in being weird and being completely different from everybody. And I feel like the U.S. is there's just a lot of pressure that there isn't here. So I don't know. I don't want to say anything else.
Do you think that the freedom that you have in your work and where you live helps make your images unique? Because you obviously have a very unique process and style.
Well, my intention has never been to have a specific style. And a lot of the photographers I talk to were always like, how did you develop a style, or how do I develop a unique voice or whatever? And literally it just comes out of your taste, you know, like if you like these tones, if you like warmer tones, if you like these colors, like I can't stand like purple or violet or certain kind of colors, so I just don't have in my images. And I like things to look kind of warm and a little bit like nostalgic, you know, like, so I add a little bit of, like, for example, reds. I'll put a little bit of reds in the darker parts of the image, so it looks like the actual physical picture has faded over time. And if you look at older pictures, the red on old film will last longer than the other dyes that are in it. So color, you know, pictures from the 1960s a lot of times will have like a little bit of a red hue, or that kind of like Instagram look, you know. Or kind of a matte finish. Or it's interesting because nowadays we have these cameras that are so powerful that we have to kind of take it down a little bit. So when they're shooting, like, you know, when they're making movies with digital cameras, they can shoot it at, you know, 60 frames, 120 frames per second. They can have extraordinary, like, you know, range of f-stops, what's it called? The dynamic range of the cameras is insane. And so what they have to do is take it back to what 35 millimeter film would have, which is 24 frames per second. And they have to make the image look worse to make it look like film. They have to add grain to it, and they have to bring down the dynamic range, and they have to, you know, like physically change it. And I do the same thing with my pictures. You know, I have to take a really, really dynamic image that has tons of information in it, and I have to make it look like, you know, go from 14 stops of dynamic range and bring it down to what film had, you know. Which I don't know. Maybe it had. I don't know enough about. I'm getting out of like my zone. What was the question again?
Something about your style was very unique.
Yeah, I mean, I think your style just comes out of like, you know, I tried to do other styles, and first of all, it's weird because people start to kind of put you into a box, so they only want you to do a certain kind of photography. Yeah. So whenever I would do like natural light, or I would do something a little more like editorial, or I would at least try, I would still make a lot of the decisions and the retouching that look like my images. And it's just because, like, okay, I like it to be a little bit of a matte look and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then I would get to the final image and it's like, oh, this looks like my image again, So it's almost like I can't, it wasn't until I looked at a bunch of my pictures beside each other that I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I definitely have I got a type.
You have a type.
It's what you like. It's what you like. It's what's pleasing to you.
Yeah, but it's not intentional, It's not like, to have it look like this, I need to do this and this. It's like, no, I just like it.
Yeah. And do you do mostly studio or do you go outside?
I go through different phases depending on, if you know anything about the Yucatan, it's about 1,000 degrees outside.
Yeah.
It's like, if I'm going to do sessions during the day, there's no way to do them outside because it's literally, like you would cook outside if you went. Right now, it's ridiculous.
All right. Yeah.
But I do go through phases where I just like there's a lot of like areas like the mangroves and the is that the right word? There's beautiful beaches here and beautiful kind of cracked sand desert looking areas that are amazing. And I don't really feel like I've fully taken advantage of those because I hate sand and I hate the beach. So it's really hard for me to go there and do that. But there's plenty of things to like that I need to work on. So that's kind of where I get motivation. And then the nice thing about the studio stuff is, I do feel like I can kind of do that dark and moody look almost like with my eyes closed, you know what I mean? And I don't know what it is specifically, but it's just, I've done it so many times. I know exactly where to put the light to get a certain look. I know exactly how to, and it does feel it's cool for the people that come in and like want to hire me and have that look. But for me, it's a little bit like, okay, I've made this meal like every single day for 20 years and, I'm kind of tired of it, but I can do it really well.
Yeah.
And there's something really kind of amazing about being able to create, something that generates money for you on this side, and it's also utilizing what you're really good at. It's really kind of powerful place to be because all of a sudden you realize, okay, the things that I'm good at, actually can be the things that are also supporting me. I can literally pay for my son's school and I can buy gas and I can, you know what I mean? I can have the power through something that's creative. It's almost like solar panels or something.
Yeah, right.
It's like you're creating energy, you're creating something out of something that you didn't realize you could. I thought I would always have to do something that I hated to, to make a living or whatever.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I know that working in a studio, you have more control than working outside because you're working with the elements. Is that so? Because I know it is for me.
That is so.
Tomorrow, we're going to shoot I think the model comes in at 6:30. So we're going to shoot behind the salon with the vintage car. It's, the sun is still out, but it's still freaking hot. It's still hot, you know. And we shot the other day near the Railroad Museum, and the model was sweating, and it was during the day. And we thought it was going to be a little bit cooler, but it wasn't. But it has taught me to see light in a different environment than working in a studio. I'd rather work in a studio because I can set those lights where I want it. I can see better. Oh, I know what I'm looking at. But when I shoot with Salvia, he tells me, do you see the light? Do you see how the sun is reflected on this dish or whatever we're using? So I'm constantly learning from him. Yeah. And that's the beauty of being not only a hairdresser, but a photographer also, you're able to learn to see, and that's the beauty about it.
Right. Yeah, I think that that's most of what photography is just really having an appreciation for light. I'm constantly looking at people's faces and analyzing the light and saying, okay, well, if I did this and this, and even when I'm walking down the street, I'm looking at people and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting face, and how would I light that or whatever? And yeah, it's cool. And also, I'm actually more influenced. Even looking at this image of myself, I have a softbox over here that I brought from my studio, and I'm looking at the shadows. If I turn off my light here, then I get a different light, and I have my little desk light here, and I'm adding, so constantly just analyzing light. When you work outside, one of the really fun things about shooting in natural light is I use apps and things, so I know exactly where the sun's going to be and everything. But you also have this countdown clock. So it's like the clock starts ticking as the sun, I usually wouldn't start until the sun was kind of maybe like 45 degrees in the sky.
Correct.
And so you just start shooting, and it's like you have to almost kind of like, it's like the hourglass is running out, and you're watching the sun go down, and then you change from golden hour to like orange, golden, and then blue. And they all have very different characteristics. So it's really fun to be like, okay, now the sun is down. Now we can turn this way and shoot some shots like this or whatever. And then once the sun is gone, you're just like, okay, we're done. You know,
Yes.
so it's like there's a fun, you know, and especially if you're walking around and finding different places with different, you know, patterns in the background and everything. It's just kind of a different feel. I really love, you know, going out with a 35 or 85 and just playing around with light. But I don't, like, professionally, I don't get a whole lot of gigs that are, I mean, I've done a few that are like on the beach. And I also love shooting. Recently, I've been doing more like slow motion video too. So it's like if you're not working with flash, if you have like constant light, you can do like, you can shoot, but then you have like slow motion of them maybe walking and looking out at the ocean or something like that, which is fun.
Correct.
I'm reflecting on conversations with you, and I think about Lulu and I have a dear friend, Dwight Miller, and he told me years ago the secret to life was to find something that you love to do, that's your passion, and figure out how to have other people pay you to do it. And I think you've mastered that. You know, congratulations, you're in that club, because it.
Well, I appreciate it. It took a really, really long, I mean, I had long periods of time when I really didn't know how. I mean, when I moved to Mexico, I had no idea how I was going to make a living or do anything. And I would get online, and this is like, you know, it's funny. I think back, I was like 2002, 2003. I lived in a a room inside of a house of a woman who like rented out all the rooms of her house, right? And there was no internet in the house. And this is when I started Jabu Studio, which started out as my graphic design company, right? So my company was in this little house. The room and the bathroom were literally in the same room. Like there was nothing there. And I went to the store and bought a long telephone cable and ran it like in the middle of the night. I would run it from the telephone that was in the other side of the house all the way over to the back of my computer. And I would connect to AOL, and I would download all my emails. I mean, this is pre-Wi-Fi, pre-cell phone, you know, or iPhones or whatever. Dark days. And I would download all my emails. I would see if I had like any messages from clients or whatever. And then they, you know, sometimes I would get a new job, and I would stay online for a little bit, and then I would disconnect, and I would, you know, I would have a couple of like things that I was supposed to be working on or whatever. Maybe I would chat with my mom on like MSN Messenger or Skype or something like that for like 2 seconds. But yeah, it's really funny kind of like looking back on that and how what a really, really long road it's been to finally kind of find a kind of like a comfortable level here. And I still, I mean, you know, I thought that I would get to the point where it was just like, oh, you know, I've gotten to a certain level with photography, so the phone's just going to be ringing all the time. And it's just not the case. You still have to hustle. You still have to get out and like put yourself in front of people. And when I do workshops also, I mean, sometimes they do really well and they fill up. You know, I just did, you know, these two in LA and San Francisco, and luckily they filled up pretty fast. And I usually have about 7 or 8 people. But I've had other, you know, times when it was just kind of like, again, crickets, and you're just like, you know, I don't know, maybe it's the wrong moment or what's going on, but it's like you're always putting yourself out there, and you're always being vulnerable, and there's no guarantee that things are going to work out. Everybody tries to put the nice, fluffy version of themselves online and show, okay, everything's always working out for me and everything's great and I'm always smiling and whatever, you know, and it's like the reality is, you know, not exactly like that, you know. So I have to constantly kind of hustle and find new motivation and, you know, be like, okay, well, you know, find people that want to shoot. I still have plenty of people that I'll find people that do a little bit of modeling here in Merida, and I'll contact them, and they're kind of like, okay, maybe I'm interested, I don't know. And in my head, I'm like, are you kidding? Like, have you seen my work? It's amazing. You know? Like, who are you to say no to me? And, you know what I mean? I mean, that's my ego. But it's like, really? Like, okay, well, But I mean, it happens. It's like, plenty of people are just like, okay, well, what do you want to do? And tell me exactly what the idea is or whatever. And I'm like, I don't have any idea. I haven't come up with it yet. I just wanted to find out if you were like interested in shooting something.
You're right.
So, it's not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was just going to be like, okay, now, they're going to call me in Mexico City and they're going to call me in LA and like they want to fly me in to like, and it's like, no, not even close, and there's so many photographers nowadays. It's like, nobody's even thinking about me unless I get myself out there. Yeah. And I've had that too, where I have like a few months where I'm not promoting myself or putting myself out there and people just forget about you, so you got, it's constantly, especially for these, like conventions and stuff, they're like, I got offended the other day because they were doing a big workshop in Mexico City. And I was like, dude, I'm like right here, I can just fly over. And I talked to the guy who did it and he was like, dude, I wasn't even like, you weren't even on my map. Like I didn't think you would be interested. I haven't heard from you, so you just have to be kind of like networking and talking with people and going to events and in the middle of things.
Well, having said
for me,
that,
it's hard.
What are your plans for the future? Well,
I went through a phase because my son is 17 and he keeps talking about leaving, and that's going to be like, I'm not going to go into the empty nest thing like it's not just going to be like cool for me. I mean, it's going to be very tough because my son is kind of like my whole life. And so if he wants to leave and go somewhere, I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do? My thing has always been like filmmaking. So I tried to put together some film projects recently, and I realized how much it's out of my wheelhouse compared to photography. Because I just I would start one thing and then I would move on to something else, and I would move on. I had like this, I was working with these actors, and then I was like, oh wow, we could do a thing where you like get this, this curse and da-da-da-da, and then we could go down to these cenotes, and then I put together this whole story, and then I was like, 2 days later, I was like, oh, wait a second, we could do this story about a woman who comes home to her family and da-da-da. And we're just like, are we doing that story that you were talking about? And you were like dead set on this. You were like making the movie and the poster in your head, and everything was like all set. And we even shot a couple of scenes from that story. Like, are you still doing that? Or are you like into this, like the crazy mom story? Or are you like, what are we doing? And so I realized that it's really hard for me, and I even had like a therapist tell me this once, which was like the way that my brain works is so perfectly aligned with photography that it's going to be very hard for me to find something that I can be that sporadic and impulsive with. Like filmmaking takes easily at least 2 years to do a project. Right. And I change gears so many times that like what I love about photography, and I also love this about the workshops, is just they're all kind of bite size, Right. So I can go in and I can do a photo shoot and it's like, okay, that's 2 or 3 hours, and then I can retouch it and that's done. You know what I mean? I can hang it up on the wall and it's good. Right. Filmmaking, you start, working on a screenplay that can take up to a year, can take even longer. You start shooting, that's going to take like a month, and then editing is going to take like 5 or 6 months. I mean, it's a really long, and then you start promoting it, that's another year. And so I just love the really quick turnaround of photography. It's like, okay, and the workshops too, it's like, okay, I know that we have a limited time, we're going to, be together. We're going to shoot, we're going to edit. I'm going to give you 1,000% of my like attention and time and everything. But there is a moment that it's like at the end of the day at 5 o'clock, I'm like, okay, for me just to have that energy, I'm going to have to go back to my hotel room and just do nothing.
You're right.
But it's just those like, it's having bite-sized projects instead of like dedicating myself to something long-term. And that's just the way that my brain works. So the future for me is still wanting to do like films. I'm still going to kind of hit my head against the wall with that, because I just love it. And I love writing stories and writing screenplays and things. But, and also like the things that I thought I would like, that when I started out with this, I was like, oh, I really want to do like classes online, and I want to be the next, Joel Grimes, or I want to be the next like one of these big teachers, like Lindsay Adler or something. And then I realized, okay, they're in their lane, like they're doing their thing, and they're really good at that. And I'm never going to be as good as them at what they're doing. So I have to be very specific to what am I good at? What can I offer, that is not me trying to be like somebody else. So yeah, I really, really love teaching, and I have enough gigs. Like I'm kind of hitting a sweet spot right now of just like whenever I want to do workshops, I find the people that have studios and I put them together, and I go and I rent a car and I bring my little pack of lights with me and everything, and 2 really cool days working with people, working with lights, and hopefully there's nothing I love more than, working with people that like they're kind of at a certain point where they feel a little bit frustrated. They don't really feel like they're moving as artists or whatever, and just kind of like through talking with them, they kind of are able to put things together in a different way or see it in a different light, or say, okay, the things that, I was talking to a girl that took my class a few years ago, and as we were driving from the airport, she gave me a ride from the airport to my house, or the place I was staying at, and she was like, yeah, I get really upset because I'll take up to like 100 pictures sometimes in a photo session, and I don't really feel like I nail it. I don't really feel like I get the images I want. And I was like, I don't even consider the first 100 pictures that I take part of the session. That's just me like warming up. Like I easily shoot 1,000 or 2,000 pictures, and 90% of them are terrible, but I've got those 10% that are just like, pretty awesome. And I could see that it changed the way that she was thinking about it. Somebody somewhere had told her the amount of pictures she should take in a normal session, or somebody had like said, been like the creativity police and said, okay, this is how it works and this is how you do it. And it's like, if people, it's like the whole like learn the rules, then start breaking them kind of thing. And you start breaking them because they don't go with the way that you do things,
Right.
So just teaching people to go with their weirdness. And, photography doesn't have any rules. I mean, there are rules to exposure and to make it look a certain way. But in any sort of creativity, I'll even say, hey, let's light this badly. So we get over the anxiety of, are we going to be able to light this and make it look good? Okay, so what would be the bad lighting scenario? Okay, let's just put a light right in somebody's face and, see how that looks. But just bring, I love those, moments. And with Photoshop too, when I'll see people who are really struggling with Photoshop and they'll see stuff that I'm doing, and then I'll see their work later on Instagram and I'm like, oh, wow, okay. Looks like there's a difference between before the class and after the class that, is notable.
I think you should have T-shirts made and sell them online and at your classes. Go with your weirdness. I love that. Embrace your weirdness.
That's a thought. That's a thought. So, Jason, where can people find you?
Well, I mean, up until I get banned, I guess I'm on Instagram primarily, So, I have a pretty unique name. Well, everybody asks me if I'm related to Paul C. Buff. But, I'm like, yeah, Uncle Paul. It's funny because I used to have a bunch of Paul C. Buff equipment. And if you buy like a PLM, like a softbox or something, it all says Buff on it. And my mom was like, oh, wow, you put your name on all your gear. And I was like, yeah, I'm a pretty big deal, Mom.
So people can find you under
Jason on Instagram, just Jabu_studio, or just look for Jason Buff. And I also have an online. I did a training series with ProEDU about 2 years ago, and I have all those classes on my website, as well as the ones that I previously had that are just me talking. I mean, one of them's they have all the really well produced videos of ProEDU, and then other videos of me just literally sitting here at my computer, like talking to a microphone and talking through the editing and everything. So that's at portraitmasterclass.com. I'm always trying to kind of show my newer stuff. I'm always learning stuff. I'm one of these weird guys. I can watch like videos of people retouching for like to relax me, like Pix Imperfect or guys like that. It's like very relaxing, and I'll just watch them editing for fun. So I'm always coming up with new ways to do things. And it's funny because like Photoshop also keeps evolving, so they've got all these little tools. There's a lot more like AI coming, which is it's interesting. I didn't really know how AI worked, so I was just kind of playing with it, and I drew a circle around a model's head, and I just wrote smooth skin to see what it would do, and a completely new person popped into it. They were like, I was like, I don't know what you're doing. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing here either. Like, I don't know who you are. Are you a real person? And he was just like, why am I wearing this dress? I'm like, I don't know. So AI is kind of, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I primarily use it just to fill out the I always shoot too close, so I always fill out things. But
Well,
that's me.
Well, Jason, it's been a freaking pleasure,
Pleasure.
Yeah, not only knowing you, but all the things about you is just really, really awesome. And on behalf on Sue and I, we want to thank you for being on this podcast.
My pleasure.
And we're going to have you come back on and talk some more, because you're not lost for any words. And you can make all the questions up anyway.
Yeah. That's my comfort zone. Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, like, this is where, like, I talk a lot, If it's something else, if it's outside of movies and lighting and photography, then like I'm very quiet, but this is again the TISM speaking, it's like I'm talking about dinosaurs or something.
Right.
But I love, I can talk all day about lighting and stuff. And I'm very thankful at a certain point that, that I found something that I can that I really engage with and really enjoy. And I think it's important for younger people to find that thing that makes them feel, like they're kind of they're aligning themselves. I see a lot of people who are trying to be something that they're not.
Right.
And once you kind of find the thing, and your brain and the way that your brain works aligns with your work or your life or whatever, then you find a certain level of happiness that you didn't know you could have when you were trying to kind of put yourself like a square peg in a round hole kind of thing.
Right.
There's some wisdom for you.
Wow. Thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
And we love you, and we'd like to have you again, a guest again.
Okay,
thanks
guys.
again.
Killing it. You're killing it with
Glad to get to know you. You're just wonderful.
Thank you.
You're like a breath of fresh air.
Wow, what an episode. That wraps up another exciting edition of Artists, Icons, and Entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you're leaving inspired and ready to chase your dreams. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode over at youtube.com/Artists, Icons, Entrepreneurs, as well as Facebook at Lulu Benavidez, on IG at Lulu Benavidez, at Evolve Hair Solutions as well. And don't forget to visit our website at lulubenavidez.com and evolvehairsolutions.com to stay updated. Until next time, keep dreaming big, creating boldly, and making your mark on the world. Thanks for listening, and take care, everyone.